morning, everyone. I have three thoughts for you today. Conveying courage, a crisis of courage, and confronting with courage. So today's gospel could be the most practical thing in all of what Jesus ever says in his public ministry, because today's message is not a specifically Christian message. It's not even a specifically religious message. It just has to do with our interactions with others. It's a very human message. And because it has to do with our interactions with others, it's probably the most difficult thing that we can possibly do. It takes courage to confront another person. I've heard it said that there are three types of courage. There's personal courage, there's public courage, and there's interpersonal courage. So I'm going to go through those. The first one is personal courage, where you have the courage to confront yourself. You look at your own weaknesses, your wounds, your past, the areas of your life that you need to take a good, hard look at. That's personal courage to confront yourself. Then there's public courage, standing up for what's right in the public arena, standing up against an injustice, even if it means that people may not like you. I have a question for all of you. Does it ever feel good to be disliked by others? Do you ever say, gee, I just wish that people could spew out venom against me and tell me how such a horrible person I am? I don't think so. Everyone wants to be liked. That's one of our human drives as social creatures. And so it takes courage to say things that might generate a negative reaction. When I'm preaching up here, I could say to myself, let's just play it safe. Tell the people what they want to hear. Don't hit on any hot button issues. Just say, I'm good, you're good, let's all just praise God today. But that would be going against the first reading that we heard from the prophet Ezekiel, where God says, I have appointed you watchman over the house of Israel. When you hear me say anything, you shall warn them for me. And if they commit wrong, I will hold you responsible for that because you didn't warn them. There's a lot going on in our culture today that needs to be called out. If I preach on certain things, I might rub some people the wrong way. There's a lot of teachings of our faith that go against what our culture tells us is okay. And so if I never wanted conflict, if I never wanted someone to get up and walk out, then I would never talk about those things and pretend that they're not really issues. That's why it takes courage to say things that need to be said, even when there are repercussions. So courage is a personal thing, it's a public thing, but most importantly for today, it's an interpersonal thing. This type of courage is the focal point for today's gospel. Because our American culture, you see, is all about conflict avoidance. It's so hard for us as Americans to go to a person's face and lovingly tell them in a calm and collected way, hey, this happened between you and me. It's not sitting well with me. We need to fix it. It's much easier for us to do one of two things. Either some people really like conflict and they just go out full force against someone else and lash out at them. But the other way, that's more common with most Americans, the way that we deal with conflict, is we avoid it. We just pretend that it's not there. And we go and tell everybody else about it, which is the opposite of what Jesus commands in today's gospel. So how does Jesus recommend that we deal with conflict? This is the core message of today's gospel. He says, first, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he does not listen, take one or two others with you. If he refuses to listen, then tell the church, tell the whole community, and bring them to him. And if he refuses to listen even then push him out as a way of bringing him back in. That's your last resort, is to excommunicate that person. That's what Jesus says. Start small, then branch out and bring others into it. But how does our human nature normally respond when someone else hurts us or offends us? If your brother sins against you, it's okay to hold a grudge. It's okay to ghost them. It's okay to go and tell everyone else how horrible that person is. It's okay to shut that person out and cancel them. And so we take Jesus' command today and we do the exact opposite. We excommunicate them and cancel them, and we tell the whole world without ever telling that person directly that they hurt us, and we never confront them about their fault. How many times have you, by show of hands, apparently done something to somebody else? You don't know what you did to them, but they're mad at you, and they won't talk to you, and they're not telling you why they're mad at you. Anyone ever have that experience? Or, to turn it on its head, how many times has someone done something to you, you're mad at them, but you never told them what they did to you? There was a recent book put out that's called Fault Lines: Fractured Families and How to Mend Them. And a national survey found that 27% of Americans 18 and older had severed all contact with at least one family member. That's just the statistics. There may be more than that. More and more, the way of shutting someone out of your life now is through what's called ghosting, which is closing off all communication with somebody without any forewarning or explanation. This used to be a practice that was just exclusive to the dating field, but now it's become a norm in the professional field. A recent study found that among Generation Z, which is those aged 13 to 25, 43% of employees say that they have accepted a job offer, but then vanished on that offer and never told the boss who hired them. Basically ghosting that relationship. Why? Well, because it's difficult to have a conversation that I found about a better job than yours. That's a conflict. And so it's just easier to not respond to you instead. There's this cultural aversion for any type of interaction that would cause discomfort and conflict. On social media, there's a tendency to see a lot of videos out there, again, produced by young people, where they explain a toxic relationship between them and their parents or their employer or anybody else in their life. And these videos get millions of views online. And you would guess that as they're telling the whole world about how horrible this person is, the last person to find out about it is the person they're complaining about. It takes Jesus' command to tell that person first, and it totally turns it on its head. It excommunicates and cancels somebody without ever telling them. And because it's seen by millions on social media, it becomes the norm. It becomes okay. That's a perfect example of how our culture today fosters a crisis of courage. It's not courageous to disparage someone publicly. That's cowardice. It takes more courage to confront the one person who offended you than to tell millions of others who have nothing to do with it. Because you have to get over yourself and your own pride. You have to get over your desire for retribution against another person. And you have to acknowledge your hurt directly to that person who hurt you. It takes a lot of courage. One of the roadblocks of courage is the fear that people might not like you if you engage in conflict, if you have uncomfortable conversations. So I'm just going to share with you in my own experience as a pastor. I've had to get into a lot of very difficult conversations. It's more like a daily habit now of having conflicts. And those of you who are employers, you know what this is like. For me, I have had to grow in the courage and face up to some very uncomfortable conversations. When people like Father Nate, it feels great. It feels wonderful. When people don't like Father Nate, then it doesn't feel good. Right? It hurts a lot. It's always an easy way out to just not address conflict, to say the things that will make people happy, and to avoid saying the hard things because you're fearful of what people will think of you. The author Matthew Kelly says that courage is not the absence of fear, but the acquired ability to move beyond fear. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the acquired ability to move beyond fear. When you confront your fears, when you bring your fears to the light, then you're able to more ably approach conflict with courage. And this is where the specifically Christian message comes in. When you see that person who's offended you as a brother or sister in the Lord, someone who deserves your love, who's been created and redeemed by God, whom I owe the love of God, then you're a lot less likely to see them as an enemy that needs to be torn down. Our second reading from St. Paul to the Romans, St. Paul says, "Owe nothing to anyone except to love one another. For the one who loves another fulfills the law." You and I owe it to someone who needs to be confronted, because in doing so, you're not focused on yourself or your fears. Instead, you're looking out for their best interests in love. So what's the resolution to all of this? How do we approach whatever conflicts that you and I have that maybe we're still guarding in our heart? Before we kick someone out of our life and tell the whole world how bad our relationship is with them, let's tell that person how bad our relationship is with them instead. Let's have the courage to confront people and situations and bring it to the light. Courage requires stepping into the unknown, but ultimately, it brings greater freedom and surrender to the Lord, because it's not you and I who are in charge, it's the Lord who's in charge.